Singapore is a vibrant city-state located at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula in Southeast Asia. It is known for its impressive blend of modern architecture, lush greenery, and a multicultural society. The city is a global financial hub, with a highly developed free market economy and a focus on innovation, technology, and business. Despite its small size, Singapore has a rich cultural diversity, with Chinese, Malay, Indian, and expatriate communities coexisting harmoniously. This diversity is evident in the country's food scene, festivals, and traditions, making it a unique cultural melting pot. Popular dishes include Hainanese chicken rice, laksa, and chili crab, and hawker centers are a must-visit for food enthusiasts. The city is also famous for its cleanliness, efficiency, and strict laws, which contribute to its reputation as one of the safest and most orderly places in the world. Urban planning and green spaces are integral to the city's design, with notable attractions like Gardens by the Bay, the Singapore Botanic Gardens, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the iconic Marina Bay Sands. Singapore's skyline is marked by futuristic skyscrapers, but it also preserves historical areas like Chinatown, Little India, and Kampong Glam. The island is a global travel and transport hub, with the world-class Changi Airport connecting it to destinations around the globe. The city is also a popular tourist destination, attracting visitors with attractions such as Universal Studios Singapore, Sentosa Island, and the Singapore Zoo. The official languages are English, Malay, Mandarin, and Tamil, reflecting the city's diverse population. Despite being a bustling metropolis, Singapore is dedicated to sustainability and environmental conservation, with many initiatives aimed at reducing its carbon footprint and promoting eco-friendly practices. Singapore, officially the Republic of Singapore, is an island country and city-state in maritime Southeast Asia. The country's territory comprises one main island, 63 satellite islands and islets, and one outlying islet. It is about 1 degree of latitude 137 kilometers or 85 miles north of the equator, off the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, bordering the Strait of Malacca to the west, the Singapore Strait to the south along with the Riau Islands in Indonesia, the South China Sea to the east, and the Straits of Johor along with the state of Johor in Malaysia to the north. Singapore's history dates back at least 800 years, having been a maritime emporium known as Temasek and subsequently a major constituent part of several successive thalassocratic empires. Its contemporary era began in 1819, when Stamford Raffles established Singapore as an entrepot trading post of the British Empire. In 1867, Singapore came under the direct control of Britain as part of the Straits settlements. During World War II, Singapore was occupied by Japan in 1942 and returned to British control as a separate crown colony following Japan's surrender in 1945. Singapore gained self-governance in 1959 and, in 1963, became part of the new Federation of Malaysia, alongside Malaya, North Borneo, and Sarawak. Ideological differences led to Singapore's expulsion from the Federation 2 years later. Singapore became an independent sovereign country in 1965. After early years of turbulence and despite lacking natural resources and a hinterland, the nation rapidly developed to become one of the 4 Asian tigers. As a highly developed country, it has one of the highest GDP per capita in the world. It is also identified as a tax haven. Singapore is the only country in Asia with a sovereign credit rating from all major rating agencies. It is a major aviation, financial, and maritime shipping hub and has consistently been ranked as one of the most expensive cities to live in for expatriates and foreign workers. Singapore ranks highly in key social indicators, education, healthcare, quality of life, personal safety, infrastructure, and housing, with a homeownership rate of 88%. Singaporeans enjoy one of the longest life expectancies, fastest internet connection speeds, lowest infant mortality rates, and lowest levels of corruption in the world. It has the 3rd highest population density of any country in the world, although there are numerous green and recreational spaces as a result of urban planning. With a multicultural population and in recognition of the cultural identities of the major ethnic groups within the nation, Singapore has 4 official languages: English, Malay, Mandarin, and Tamil. English is the common language, with exclusive use in numerous public services. Multiracialism is enshrined in the constitution and continues to shape national policies in education, housing, and politics. Singapore is a parliamentary republic in the Westminster tradition of unicameral parliamentary government, and its legal system is based on common law. While the country is de jure a multi-party democracy, with free elections, the government under the People's Action Party wields widespread control and political dominance. The PAP has governed the country continuously since full internal self-government was achieved in 1959 and holds a supermajority in parliament. One of the 5 founding members of ASEAN, Singapore is also the headquarters of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Secretariat, the Pacific Economic Cooperation Council Secretariat, and is the host city of many international conferences and events. Singapore is also a member of the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, the East Asia Summit, the Non-Aligned Movement, and the Commonwealth of Nations. In 1299, according to the Malay Annals, the Kingdom of Singapura was founded on the island by Sang Nila Utama. Although the historicity of the accounts as given in the Malay Annals is the subject of academic debates, it is nevertheless known from various documents that Singapore in the 14th century, then known as Temasek, was a trading port under the influence of both the Majapahit Empire and the Siamese kingdoms, and was a part of the Indus Valley. These Indianized kingdoms were characterized by surprising resilience, political integrity, and administrative stability. Historical sources also indicate that around the end of the 14th century, its ruler Parameshwara was attacked by either the Majapahit or the Siamese, forcing him to move to Malacca, where he founded the Sultanate of Malacca. Archaeological evidence suggests that the main settlement on Fort Canning Hill was abandoned around this time, although a small trading settlement continued in Singapore for some time afterwards. In 1613, Portuguese raiders burned down the settlement, and the island faded into obscurity for the next 2 centuries. By then, Singapore was nominally part of the Johor Sultanate. The wider maritime region and much trade was under Dutch control for the following period after the 1641 Dutch conquest of Malacca. The British governor Stamford Raffles arrived in Singapore on 28 January 1819 and soon recognized the island as a natural choice for the new port. The island was then nominally ruled by Tengku Abdul Rahman, the Sultan of Johor, who was controlled by the Dutch and the Bugis. However, the Sultanate was weakened by factional division. Abdul Rahman, the Temenggung of Johor to Tengku Abdul Rahman, as well as his officials, were loyal to the Sultan's elder brother Tengku Long, who was living in exile in Penangat Island, Riau Islands. With the Temengung's help, Raffles managed to smuggle Tengku Long back into Singapore. Raffles offered to recognize Tengku Long as the rightful Sultan of Johor under the title of Sultan Hussein, as well as provide him with a yearly payment of $5,000 and another $3,000 to the Temenggung in return. Sultan Hussein would grant the British the right to establish a trading post on Singapore. The Treaty of Singapore was signed on 6 February 1819. In 1824, a further treaty with the Sultan led to the entire island becoming a part of the British Empire. In 1826, Singapore became part of the Straits Settlements, then under the jurisdiction of British India. Singapore became the regional capital in 1836. Prior to Raffles' arrival, there were only about 1,000 people living on the island, mostly indigenous Malays along with a handful of Chinese. By 1860, the population had swelled to over 80,000, more than half being Chinese. Many of these early immigrants came to work on the pepper and gambier plantations. In 1867, the Straits Settlements were separated from British India, coming under the direct control of Britain. Later, in the 1890s, when the rubber industry became established in Malaya and Singapore, the island became a global center for rubber sorting and export. Singapore was not greatly affected by the First World War 1914-18, as the conflict did not spread to Southeast Asia. The only significant event during the war was the 1915 Singapore mutiny by Muslim sepoys from British India, who were garrisoned in Singapore. After hearing rumors that they were to be sent to fight the Ottoman Empire, a Muslim state, the soldiers rebelled, killing their officers and several British civilians before the mutiny was suppressed by non-Muslim troops arriving from Johor and Burma. After World War I, the British built the large Singapore naval base as part of the defensive Singapore strategy. Originally announced in 1921, the construction of the base proceeded at a slow pace until the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in 1931. Costing $60 million and not fully completed in 1938, it was nonetheless the largest dry dock in the world, the third largest floating dock, and had enough fuel tanks to support the entire British Navy for 6 months. The base was defended by heavy 15-inch 380mm naval guns stationed at Fort Siloso, Fort Canning and Labrador, as well as a Royal Air Force airfield at Tenga Air Base. Winston Churchill touted it as the Gibraltar of the East, and military discussions often referred to the base as simply east of Suez. However, the British Home Fleet was stationed in Europe, and the British could not afford to build a second fleet to protect their interests in Asia. The plan was for the Home Fleet to sail quickly to Singapore in the event of an emergency. As a consequence, after World War II broke out in 1939, the fleet was fully occupied with defending Britain, leaving Singapore vulnerable to Japanese invasion. Singapore has a highly developed market economy, based historically on extended entrepot trade. Along with Hong Kong, South Korea, and Taiwan, Singapore is one of the 4 Asian tigers and has surpassed its peers in terms of gross domestic product (GDP) per capita. Between 1965 and 1995, growth rates averaged around 6% per annum, transforming the living standards of the population. The Singaporean economy is regarded as free, innovative, dynamic and business-friendly. For several years, Singapore has been one of the few countries with a AA credit rating from the Big Three, and the only Asian country to achieve this rating. Singapore attracts a large amount of foreign investment as a result of its location, skilled workforce, low tax rates, advanced infrastructure and zero tolerance against corruption. It was the world's 4th most competitive economy in 2023, according to the International Institute for Management Development's World Competitiveness ranking of 64 countries, with the highest GDP per capita. Roughly 44% of the Singaporean workforce is made up of non-Singaporeans. Despite market freedom, Singapore's government operations have a significant stake in the economy, contributing 22% of the GDP. The city is a popular location for conferences and events. The currency of Singapore is the Singapore dollar, issued by the Monetary Authority of Singapore. It has been interchangeable with the Brunei dollar at par value since 1967. MAS manages its monetary policy by allowing the Singapore dollar exchange rate to rise or fall within an undisclosed trading band. This is different from most central banks, which use interest rates to manage policy. Singapore has the world's 11th largest foreign reserves and one of the highest net international investment position per capita. Singapore has been identified as a tax haven for the wealthy due to its low tax rates on personal income and tax exemptions on foreign-based income and capital gains. Individuals such as Australian millionaire retailer Brett Blundy and multi-billionaire Facebook co-founder Eduardo Sabrin are 2 examples of wealthy individuals who have settled in Singapore. In 2009, Singapore was removed from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development least GRIS of tax havens and ranked 4th on the Tax Justice Network's 2015 Financial Secrecy Index of the world's offshore financial service providers. Banking 1/8 of the world's offshore capital, while providing numerous tax avoidance and evasion opportunities. In August 2016, the Straits Times reported that Indonesia had decided to create tax havens on 2 islands near Singapore to bring Indonesian capital back into the tax base. In October 2016, the Monetary Authority of Singapore admonished and fined UBS and DBS and withdrew Falcon Private Bank's banking license for their alleged role in the Malaysian sovereign fund scandal. In 2016, Singapore was rated the world's most expensive city for the 3rd consecutive year by the Economist Intelligence Unit, and this remained true in 2018. The government provides numerous assistance programs to the homeless and needy through the Ministry of Social and Family Development, so acute poverty is rare. Some of the programs include providing financial assistance to needy households, providing free medical care at government hospitals, and paying for children's tuition. Other benefits include compensation for gym fees to encourage citizens to exercise, up to 166,000 Singapore dollars as a baby bonus for each citizen, heavily subsidized healthcare, financial aid for the disabled, the provision of reduced-cost laptops for poor students, rebates for costs such as public transport and utility bills, and more. As of 2018, Singapore's ranking in the Human Development Index is 9th in the world, with an HDI value of 0.935. Singapore consists of 63 islands, including the main island, Pulau Ujung. There are two man-made connections to Johor, Malaysia, the Johor-Singapore Causeway in the north and the Tuas Second Link in the west. Jurong Island, Pulau Tekong, Pulau Ubin and Sentosa are the largest of Singapore's smaller islands. The highest natural point is Bukit Timah Hill at 163.63 m 537 feet under British rule. Christmas Island and the Cocos Islands were part of Singapore, and both were transferred to Australia in 1957. Pedra Branca is the nation's easternmost point. Land reclamation projects have increased Singapore's land area from 580 square kilometers in the 1960s to 710 square kilometers 270 sq mi by 2015, an increase of some 22%. 130 kilometers. The country is projected to reclaim another 56 square kilometers 20 sq mi. Some projects involve merging smaller islands through land reclamation to form larger, more functional and habitable islands, as has been done with Jurong Island. The type of sand used in reclamation is found in rivers and beaches rather than deserts, and is in great demand worldwide. In 2010, Singapore imported almost 15 million tons of sand for its projects, the demand being such that Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam have all restricted or barred the export of sand to Singapore in recent years. As a result, in 2016 Singapore switched to using polders for reclamation, in which an area is enclosed and then pumped dry. Singapore has a tropical rainforest climate with no distinctive seasons, uniform temperature and pressure, high humidity, and abundant rainfall. Temperatures usually range from 23 to 32 degrees Celsius 73 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. While temperature does not vary greatly throughout the year, there is a wetter monsoon season from November to February. From July to October, there is often hatch caused by bushfires in neighboring Indonesia, usually from the island of Sumatra. Singapore follows the GMT+8 time zone, 1 hour ahead of the typical zone for its geographical location. This causes the sun to rise and set particularly late during February, where the sun rises at 7:15 am and sets around 7:20 pm. During July, the sun sets at around 7:15 pm. The earliest the sun rises and sets is in late October and early November, when the sun rises at 6:46 am and sets at 6:50 pm. Singapore recognizes that climate change and rising sea levels in the decades ahead will have major implications for its low-lying coastline. It estimates that the nation will need to spend $100 billion over the course of the next century to address the issue. In its 2020 budget, the government set aside an initial $5 billion towards a coastline and flood protection fund. Singapore is the first country in Southeast Asia to levy a carbon tax on its largest carbon-emitting corporations producing more than 25,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year, at $5 per ton. Tourism is a major industry and contributor to the Singaporean economy, attracting 13.6 million international tourists in 2023, more than double Singapore's total population. Tourism contributed directly to about 3% of Singapore's GDP, on average, in the 10 years before 2023, excluding the COVID-19 pandemic years. Altogether, the sector generated approximately 8.6% of Singapore's employment in 2016. In 2015, Lonely Planet and the New York Times listed Singapore as their top and 6th best world destinations to visit, respectively. Well-known landmarks include the Merlion, the Esplanade, Marina Bay Sands, Gardens by the Bay, Jewel Changi Airport, Chijmes National Gallery Singapore, the Singapore Flyer, the Orchard Road Shopping Belt, the resort island of Sentosa, and the Singapore Botanic Gardens. Singapore's first UNESCO World Heritage Site, all located in southern and eastern Singapore. The Singapore Tourism Board is the statutory board under the Ministry of Trade and Industry, which is tasked with the promotion of the country's tourism industry. In August 2017, the STB and the Economic Development Board unveiled a unified brand, Singapore Passion, made possible to market Singapore internationally for tourism and business purposes. The Orchard Road district, which contains multi-story shopping centers and hotels, can be considered the center of shopping and tourism in Singapore. Other popular tourist attractions include the Singapore Zoo, river wonders, bird paradise and night safari located in northern Singapore. The Singapore Zoo has embraced the open zoo concept whereby animals are kept in enclosures, separated from visitors by hidden dry or wet moats, instead of caging the animals, and the River Wonders has 300 species of animals, including numerous endangered species. Singapore promotes itself as a medical tourism hub, with about 200,000 foreigners seeking medical care there each year. Singapore Medical Services aim to serve at least 1 million foreign patients annually and generate $3 billion in revenue.